And this is kind of funny to start this one out. My first line here is this one will be a little on the shorter side because Surface is a whole lot less complicated than people make it out to be. And then I have a million paragraphs. So anyway, yes, I do have something that I'm going to be reading off of. But if you go somewhere for a class or something and somebody's giving a presentation or a speech or instructing you on something, I think that you would hope that they have curriculum. So sorry if this seems a little rigid, but Surface is one of those mathematical constants that gets murky with application, and that means either the actual application, depending on the kind of pad, the age of the pad, spinner, by hand, water, no water, whatever, but with actually applying the correct surface to the correct ball and using it in the correct way. Now, Surface is the absolute number one effective or efficient way to adjust your ball reaction without going to significant extremes like throwing it super slow or really adjusting your rev rate one way or the other. I'm talking about, just normal or reasonable adjustments. Now, you'll hear me say it in a lot of videos about box surfaces. Don't be afraid to change them even before you throw the ball, because you may already know that 1500 grit or React-A-Gloss is not going to work out for you or your conditions. Surface is very predictable and constant. So the rougher the cover of the ball, the sooner it's going to hook, the more it's going to hook, and the smoother it's going to be. Now, naturally, vice versa, when you have a shinier ball, the later it's going to hook, the less it's going to hook, and the sharper the sharper reacting it's going to be. Now, rougher surface means more texture. It makes the ball like a snow tire so that it can help to dig through the oil and contact the lane so that it can produce traction. Because it's getting more contact with the lane through the oil, the reaction isn't going to be as dynamic or quick responding when it gets out of the oil or hits the dry boards on the back end, because its relationship with the lane really hasn't changed that much. A rougher surface also reduces the amount of surface area that you're going to have in contact with the lane, and this is something really important that I'll talk about next. Shiny or smoother surface means it can't dig through the oil, so it's going to hydroplane on it, but then respond really strongly when it hits dry boards because there's more surface area in contact with the lane. Now, the critical piece that people misunderstand is that there's a balance between traction and shape or response. People think, okay, this is a stronger ball with a rougher surface. It should hook more than this weaker, shiny ball, because unfortunately they equate board coverage with hook. The problem with this is that weaker, shiny balls are pretty well 100% dependent on having friction there. So if you got a shiny ball and they're just hydroplaning on the oil, if you have 60 feet of oil, they're just going to skid indefinitely. A ball with surface it's not going to hook a whole bunch, because you'd be surprised how little amount or how little oil is required to actually get the ball to skid or go down the lane. On heavier balls or on heavier volumes, sometimes they look like plastic balls, but on drier conditions, like most of the house shots in the country are, they're going to look like monsters. Now, stronger sanded balls, on the other hand, get a lot of actual dig or traction, but because they also have less surface area in contact with the lane, they're not going to react nearly as sharply or strongly to the dry as shinier balls do. I'm sorry if this is not making sense, but let me explain it this way. Surface creates a more stable and consistent amount of surface area of the ball in contact with the lane throughout. Shine creates very little to no surface contact with the lane in oil, an immense amount of it on dry. This is why shiny balls are cleaner and sharper, and sanded balls are earlier and smoother. All right, so to try to illustrate this a little bit, basically when you have something that's got a lot of surface on it, it's like a snow tire. It's something where I'm going to hold the pen right this time so that you guys can actually see what's on the whiteboard. You basically have all these peaks and valleys, and so this is where the oil goes, and the points are where the ball can actually contact the lane. And so that's how snow tires work. That's how other things work, so that you can actually dig, or that's how ball surface works, so that the rougher the surface, the ball can actually dig through the oil and contact the lane a little bit. So if you have a smoother surface, then let's just do that to make it less complicated. You're not digging through anything with that. It's a very smooth surface, and so it's just going to ride on top of it. It's just going to skid or ride on top of that oil because it can't really dig down through the oil. So what happens when the ball hits the back end, this is why strong balls are smoother and weaker than weaker shiny balls, because most of the time when you're bowling on a lot of friction or a lot of dry, this is a whole bunch of surface area in contact with dry lane. However, when this is great to have surface for oil, but when you get out of the oil, there's not a whole lot of surface area in contact with the lane, because all the ball is hitting is on these points here. That's the only contact that the ball is getting with the lane. And so a more aggressive ball, again, like snow tires, it gets better contact with the lane in oil than a smoother shiny ball will. But on dry lane, the smooth ball is going to have the entire surface area of the ball that's touching the lane is going to be getting traction. And I'll explain this a little bit. I'll explain this a little bit further here in a minute. Now, another issue that's a big one, no matter what level you're at, is learning how to recognize the difference between a ball not hooking and a ball burning up, because they look very similar. And a lot of people don't understand the concept of a ball burning up in the first place. They just think that the stronger a ball is, the more it should hook and the more boards it should cover. But it works like tires, like the diagram I just showed you. Everyone knows that you don't use racing slicks on snow because you'll just spin and spin and never get anywhere. That's what snow tires are for, to dig through the snow to get at least some traction. However, if you're on dry track, the slicks are going to grip like crazy because it's dry, tacky asphalt and you've got a ton of surface area in contact with the track. Now, if you instead use snow tires on the racetrack, of course you know that you're not going to get anywhere near the same amount of traction, even though snow tires are technically grippier. Same concept in bowling, but the problem is that there's both oil and dry on the same lane. It'd be like having snow in certain places on a racetrack, but you can only use one kind of tire. Snow tires would be fine in the snow, but would get chewed up and slide around on the dry, while racing slicks would get all kinds of traction on the dry while literally be ice skating on the snow. This again is why a cleaner cover or a lower end shiny ball can sometimes out-hook a stronger sanded ball on drier conditions, because the stronger sanded ball has a lot more surface area in contact with the lane in the oil than a shiny ball does, but a whole lot less on the dry, just like I just showed you. This is why strong sanded balls are designed for oilier or heavier volume conditions, and shiny weaker balls are designed for drier conditions. Now, I put this demonstration in a different video, but I'll add it in here as well because it's a hard concept to understand and a hard one to read. So we'll actually I had a really good example. On this left lane, I'd already bowled exactly 7 games shooting some video, and I took the opportunity to film a fresh lane versus transition lane comparison between a strong ASIM in the Evoke and a medium strength symmetric ball in the Venom Shock. And unfortunately, the footage from the higher cam with all the audio was corrupted. Looking at the Evoke, this is what burning up looks like. There's too much friction for the Evoke, so even though you can't really see it, it's doing too much too early and just kind of giving up down lane. Now, at the same time, you could be watching and thinking, I don't think so. That kind of looks like carry down. The ball is just going too long and not finishing. Now, the way we check this is with the Venom Shock. If there is carry down, or the stronger ASIM ball is in fact going too long and not finishing, that should be exaggerated by the shock because it's weaker and symmetric. However, the shock looks just fine, so even though I already knew the Evoke was burning up because it looked amazing filming earlier on that lane and then started to puke, the shock confirms that we don't have any back end issues. Now, moving to the fresh right lane, same pattern, hadn't bowled on it yet. All of a sudden the Evoke wakes back up and gets very dynamic and continuous. This is because there's enough oil on the lane to keep it from hooking so much so early so that it can have a more lively and effective shape down lane. Saying that you should use snow tires to race with rather than racing slicks because the snow tires are more grippy makes no more sense than expecting a strong ball with surface to out-hook a weak shiny ball on dry conditions, because it's the same thing or the same concept. You have to use the correct tool for the correct situation, and surface is a huge part of that equation. So using shine on stronger balls and surface on weaker balls is another wrinkle that we'll get into in one of the upcoming videos. You have to find a happy medium for your game and the conditions you bowl on. We always sand Angel stuff unless it comes at 2,000 or lower out of the box, because with her average to lower rev rate, shine results in her ball skidding too far and being too sharp or too responsive to the dry. So polish or shine creates a lot more inconsistent and sensitive ball reaction for her. Now, I also have a medium to lower rev rate, but I have a whole lot heavier ball roll than she does. So when I use surface, for me, that typically ends up in the ball being too early and too slow. Now, if it's too early, that forces me inside to get the ball down the lane, and then it's too slow to react or finish with much conviction on the back end. Now, manufacturers do design certain balls with an accompanying surface in mind, but just because it comes shiny doesn't mean it has to stay shiny or will be best for you shiny. Despite liking shine, I actually took my Theorem to 3000 grit because it was just a little too whippy. It was just too sharp, and so putting a little surface on it put it in the sweet spot for me. Now on the opposite end, I like to run my main Summit with a little bit of lane shine because it's already a very early, slow reacting bowling ball, and it's just a little too early and slow with surface for league. It looks great lane shine though. However, because the Theorem is already a cleaner, more responsive ball, the surface just balances it out. The Summit's a very early and chonky ball, and so even with lane shine, it's still an early and chonky ball, and so they still kind of maintain their own respective roles for me. The Theorem still gets down the lane, is pretty flippy. The Summit's still pretty strong and early and smooth, and so I've just tweaked them to fit a little bit better for me. That's going to do it for this one. In the next video, we will actually start talking about building arsenals with the one ball or the strongest ball in your bag. Once again, please check the description. I try to advertise as little as possible, but I do a lot of good stuff with the return, so please don't make me put it back front and center. I do want to thank and take care of my sponsors and get a lot of extra stuff done, but I also don't want to sound like a used car salesman either. And I definitely appreciate all the things that, all the support that everybody's already given me. So thanks for watching, and may the strikes be with you.